Hello, I'm Ztarli, and in this video I'll be doing some dragon sketches to show you how I sketch and design concepts for dragons. This is another one of my sort of talking at the same time as drawing videos, so it will be a bit longer than my normal ones as there won't be any speeding up of the recording. It'll all be at standard speed. So first off, as usual, I've created myself a new document at the 4K size. And I've just got my layers over here. I'm just starting with the one layer to begin with, and I'll probably only use one layer, to be honest, because this video is just going to be sketching. I'm not going to be doing any coloring of any kind in this video. Now, when it comes to choosing what brush I use for sketching, it really depends on how detailed I want to get it. If it's going to be something super rough, then I tend to go with these pencil choices here. And I just go with like a dulled color. I like blues and purples and stuff, so something like this. And I just sort of sketch fairly freely and loosely. Usually when I'm doing my own dragon sketches, I just kind of start it like I usually start with some kind of shape for the head. For some reason, I always start with a head. So if I want a sort of roundish looking dragon or like a more angular, I'll start off with these kinds of shapes. And then I'll just sort of keep sketching until I have like a shape of the head that I like. I do like dragons with big cheeks, so you quite often see that I do these sort of rounded shapes around the cheeks. And I often divot in just below the horns as well to give a more interesting shape and sort of, I guess, like a skull shape to the dragons. So that's kind of just how I'd normally sketch. I just sort of go for it, but for the purpose of this video I want to show you how I sort of come up with the ideas rather than just sketching straight from my head. I want to show you how I came to this point, because I have been drawing for like 20 years, so there's a lot of stuff that happened before I got to this point where I could just sketch straight from my head and not do more detailed sketching before putting down shapes and stuff. So what I'll do is I'll just show you what I would do usually before going straight to making the shapes, doing these more defined lines of the heads of my drawings. First thing you really need to decide before starting a dragon sketch is what kind of dragon are you actually drawing. There's lots of different types. There's two main types that I enjoy drawing. There's the sort of I guess modern Western dragons that very sort of symmetrical, sort of like a big cat with wings, I suppose. This sort of 4 legs, set of wings, longish neck, pointyish face. This is an amazing sketch, by the way. This sort of Western sort of dragon, and then you've got like Asian dragons or worms or whatever you want to call them, which have much longer bodies and no wings. They can have beards and whiskers and stuff, and they have hair often along their spine or spikes or something like that. So you kind of really need to know which one of these sorts of dragons you're going to be drawing before you plan your picture, because they are very different. There's also the other fairly common one is wyverns, which I'm not a super fan of, but they are very popular a dragon to draw. Some people don't class them as dragons, they say they're wyverns, but there's sort of like a saying with dragons is like a wyvern can be a dragon, but a dragon can't be a wyvern, or something like that, where it's sort of like the wyverns are accepted as being part of like the overarching theme of a dragon, but there's also dragons that have 4 legs and 1 set of wings, but if they had just the 1 set of wings and 2 legs, then they wouldn't be known as a dragon. It's kind of like a weird thing. There's some really good sort of diagrams and stuff online if you want to look into it more, but I sort of go by that sort of idea that wyverns are dragons. They're just like a subspecies of dragon, as are, you know, long dragons and western dragons and that kind of thing. So once you've decided what dragon you're going to draw, then you've got to know what sort of features it's going to have. So if you're drawing a dragon that you've never drawn before, the first thing I would normally do is actually plan out what it looks like before putting it in any kind of pose, because it's harder to decide on like the design features of a creature if it's posed. It's harder to sort of know where to put spikes and fluff and that kind of stuff. So you know what, for this one I'm going to do a wyvern. So I'm going to start with sketching out a sort of wyvern shape. So they generally have fairly large chest areas, as they have a lot of muscles to support their wings, which also counts as, you know, their front arms. So they tend to be very large in the chest and smaller in the back end. So I'll start with a round shape for the chest and then sort of slope it down to a long tail. I always have long tails for my dragons. It's got to have a long tail. So sort of do this kind of shape here. And then where the neck's going to join, and I usually just do sort of like a S-ish shaped neck, and then the shape of whatever sort of feel you want to have. I'm going to go with a sort of a softer feel, so an ovally shaped head, and then just using shapes here to define sort of how roughly we want the legs to go. So we've got the forward part here, and then they usually go back on themselves, and we've got a bit of muscle here, so I always do a bit of a bulge. You've got your ankle that goes into the foot here, so I do these kinds of shapes. And generally my sketches are very rough, so they don't normally get much better than this before I go into color. It's just so I know where I'm going to be coloring my shapes. With wyverns, depending on what kind of pose it's going to be in, if it's on the ground, you're going to want to have thought about how the wings fold when it's on the ground. So you may want to actually sketch out the wing to the side first to know what it would look like, so you can sort of decide how it would fold. So I usually like this shoulder circle, and then this upper arm, I guess, and then the lower arm, and where a hand would be. And I always do use my own arms as reference, since wings are generally just stretched out arms. They have the same sort of bones, they're just elongated. So this would be where the hand is. I like to have a separate thumb claw for gripping on things, so I'll always do this part separately. And then you kind of just decide on how big you want your wing and what kind of shape it's going to be by defining how long the finger bones are. So if I wanted a sort of a tapered look, then this first finger bone here wouldn't be very long, and then the one next to it would be longer, and then longer still, and maybe I want to taper it back again, so I make it shorter here. And then you just link the parts up in between. And I always like to join my membrane quite a long way down the dragon, so it's got a more believable wing shape. But a lot of games and stuff will actually come right up back like this, and that's because it's easier to animate if you haven't got all this extra flap here. But this is a drawing, so I don't have to worry about that. So mine will always be longer and attaching to the body like this sort of thing. I do also sometimes like to add the bit of membrane in between sort of the hand and the shoulder across like this. Again, I just sort of feel like it makes a more believable wing. It catches more air, and I'll often have it that the membrane actually crosses over the shoulder. I'll show you what I mean later on in the picture. So now I know sort of what sort of shape the wing is going to be. I probably should have done that on a separate layer, but I'll just undo it all instead. Then, using my own arm as reference, I'll fold my arm to see how the parts would fold on a dragon or a wyvern. as it's on the ground. So I imagine that my elbow would be going back up like this. So we have quite strong muscles. And then it comes forward again. And for wyverns, they kind of have to have quite long wings in order to be able to reach the ground properly if you are going to have them on the ground. And then this is actually where the head would be, and I'd have my thumb claw and the rest of the wing bones folding back up all together. Now if you actually look at references for animals that are similar, like bats, their wing membranes actually stretch and shrink when the animal moves its wings. So you wouldn't actually have loose hanging, like it wouldn't be like cloth. It's kind of more like elastic. So when they fold their wings, you don't have all this extra folding sort of happening here. It just kind of becomes smaller. Same thing for when if you have the wings stretched, it looks a bit stretched, but it's still fairly smooth. And they sort of billow a bit, but not like with wrinkles. They just kind of get bigger when they're catching the wings. But if you're not sure, bats are a really good reference, especially if you're looking up flying bats for any kind of wings where there's no feathers involved and you want a more realistic look. So now I've got this pretty awful rough sketch. I'm just going to make some changes to it. So it's a bit off center. I'm going to move it into the center and make it a little bit smaller just so I have some more room to do stuff. I decided this tail, it's too upright, so I'm just going to select it and move it down, and I'll move where it's rotating from by dragging this dot here and then rotate it down like this. I'll probably make those wings bigger too. But yeah, so this is my sort of rough sketch on what I want it to look like, and I'll create a layer above it and dull this one down so I can add more detail to the sketch. So now I'm going to start defining what the actual dragon looks like. So details like thorns and horns and spikes and claws and all that kind of stuff, and what its head's going to look like. So I'm just going to start sketching over top of this part here. And I think I'll have this sort of shape. And then coming back down again for its jaw bones. Oh, I think I'll have its mouth a bit lower here. And for the horns, I think we'll have a few horns on here. I think I'll have some pointing forward horns, so I'm just going to sketch out some horn ideas. I think that looks okay. And the eye, have some eye ridge, so the actual ridge above the eye, and then the eye shape here. And I'm going to define this neck a bit more. Now I always like having this bit of, I guess it's like the skin underneath the jaw that connects to the neck. So you have this sort of neck shape here, but I always connect it with this shape to make it, I think it makes it look a bit more believable. And then I do this sort of muscular shape along the side of the neck, a bit, not quite the middle, a bit off the middle. If you want references for like how necks and things go for dragons, I would recommend looking up things like, depending on how long the neck is, giraffes and things like antelopes and gazelles and things like that. Or maybe even birds like swans or pelicans are all good references for longer necks if you're struggling with how to draw the neck itself. I always like having quite a large connection to the body of the dragon. So once the neck hits where the shoulders and the rib cage would be, I sort of always do this sort of shape, sort of wedge shape, to define, this is no longer the neck, this is the chest. And we're going to pretend the wings aren't here for this part. And I'm just making a bit of a sort of rib cage shape here. And a bulge where the shoulder connects. And then smoothing it out for the rump, or where the legs would connect to the body. And his head's a little bit big, so I'm going to make that smaller. Now, I wouldn't worry too much about your sketch if it's messy looking or you're doing stuff like this and like cutting stuff in half. It is a sketch. It's not your final picture. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can make changes later. You can make changes much later, like I often do, and just, you know, change whole design aspects when you're halfway through painting. Nothing's ever permanent. You're not ever completely stuck with a design. You're always free to sort of change things, so don't get too hung up on trying to get a sketch perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just so you have an idea of what you're doing and what you're drawing. I actually think it might just be the head that's too big, so I'm just going to change the head. Yeah, I think that's better. And drawing the rib cage up to the rest of the body, you could sort of approach this one of two ways, depending on what references you're looking at. If you're looking at things like greyhounds or dogs, they quite often have like a chest that, especially greyhounds, that dips back in and has like a very thin top. Then they have their legs, these awful legs. This fast dog, like that. But if you're looking at other animals, particularly some horses and maybe big cats, their bellies don't always go up like that. They could instead come down a little bit and be more like this. And here's my legs. I'm more of a fan of the thin gut, so that's what I'm going to do for this one. And then we've got our legs. Leg references for wyverns are a bit difficult because there's not really any animals that are shaped like this. You could look at bats, but bats really don't have very defined back legs. And birds don't hunch over like this, so you kind of just got to wing it a little bit. You can look at references for animals like cats, big cats and dogs, but they don't really stand like this. So I just sort of think about that they have to have pretty strong muscles, so I usually try and make this muscle here quite large. And generally when I'm drawing the picture, there'll be a lot of fiddling around with this part of the dragon to try and make it a more believable shape as I'm posing it. As for the feet itself, bird feet are good references. If you're not looking for a grippy sort of dragon, like something that would snatch a fish from the ocean, you want it to look more cute, then, you know, use big cat feet. They're cute. But I like to have my dragons look like they can just pick stuff up out of the air, so yeah. Tails I love and hate. I cannot do straight lines or curved lines. I have shaky hands. So before I had features like this one, which is the smoothing feature, I despise drawing straight lines or curved lines in which you have to do things in one single smooth motion, because mine would never end up smooth. But lucky with this program, I've got a line smoothing feature, so I can quite easily get this nice smooth tail. And if I really wanted to be lazy, there's a lazy option which really holds your hand here, so you can't really get a non-smooth line using this feature, which is good because not everybody can hold a steady hand. let's add some more details to this. We've got a nose here somewhere. I'm going to make this a little bit more defined. Maybe have some more spikes here, but a bit higher up. Spiky face. And I'm going to make this bit jagged. What should we do for the spine? This could be interesting. I'm going to make it like a frill thing, like a fish would have. Maybe he's an aquatic going, or a sea wyvern. See what I mean about not being able to do smooth lines? Yeah, he's a fishing wyvern. Alright, let's get those wings back in. I might actually do the wing on a separate layer, just in case I want to make it bigger or smaller. It'll just make it easier. The dragon wings, like the muscular part of them, is also a difficult thing to do or decide how it should go, because bat wings, they have a bit of muscle, but then they're smaller animals. They don't have to power as much weight into the air. So dragon ones, you kind of have to exaggerate them a bit more. So for reference for this, if you look up dragon anatomy, you'll find some people have drawn some very good, like muscular drawings of dragons that you can use for reference, and I often do, especially when it comes to doing 4-limbs dragons and trying to decide how the extra limbs will attach to, you know, I like having my wings up where the shoulder is, so you kind of have some muscles very close together, and trying to decide how the muscles would intertwine in those areas I always find very difficult. So I find those anatomical sort of drawings of dragons quite helpful for that kind of thing. For wyverns, you can sort of just, you know, look at muscular drawings of birds to see how the muscles would attach to the actual chest and that kind of thing. Have quite a rounded sort of claw here. My sketches get very sketchy when I'm still not sure how designs are going. So see, I'll just go back and forth over the same lines over and over again. I'll probably need to do an over sketch again after this, because I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing with these wings yet. I like using this distort tool if I'm not sure of the shape of something, because you can just kind of grab different corners and move stuff around. You can also lock two corners together so they move in unison. which I find really handy. So it's especially handy in the sketch stage where distorting stuff won't hurt your picture that much. I think that's better. So I don't need this bottom sketch anymore, so I'm just going to delete it by clicking and dragging it off the page. So I've decided to go for a more rounded look for things, so I'm probably going to change these wings to have more of a rounded feel to them than the sharper one I had before. Sort of like a seabird. This sort of longer looking shape to the wings. I like to make sure they have the right number of finger bones as well. I've got too many. There we go. So if you look at birds and the shapes of their wings, birds do have very different wings depending on what kind of thing they do. Seabirds, especially ones flying for long distances, will have these longer, narrower shaped wings that are better for gliding over water. Birds that zip amongst trees might have smaller wings so they can easily maneuver. And then like owls have wings that are shaped to dampen their sounds, the sounds of flapping, so they can sneak up on stuff. And birds of prey will have varying different types of wings depending on what their specialty is. They may have wings designed for faster diving speeds or just economical flying. So if you have something in mind, you want your dragon to be skilled at a certain thing and you want a realistic looking feel to the wings, then have a look at birds that do similar things, and I'd edit your wings to fit that shape. It'll not only make it a more believable creature, it'll also make it a more interesting creature instead of just going with the stock standard shape that nearly everybody draws their wings in. So I'm happy with this design for this dragon now, so I'll probably put it in some kind of pose now. So I'm just going to merge these two layers together so they're only in one. I've still got this down here. Don't need this. And I'm going to make it smaller so it's out of the way so I have space for my actual sketch. Wow. Now I have to decide what we're actually going to draw. For this next sketch, I've decided to look up some reference pictures to get a sort of a feel of how this dragon would move, because I've decided it's a seagoing dragon, so flying on land, fishing in water sort of thing. So I've looked up some images of cormorants diving as inspiration, and I'm going to base my sketches around the idea of like it diving into water. So let's try some sketches out. Sometimes I'll do several sketches before settling on one for to actually use for the picture, and sometimes I'll just go for the very first one I do depending on how I feel about it. So I have something in mind here. I kind of want this like a back angle with its wings folded back, so I'll start with like the chest area, and it's sort of going downwards with its legs here. Oh, they probably go this way a bit more. And I want them to be tucked up, kind of like how a cormorant would dive. This is not a good sketch. And then the wings Can't really see much of its head though. So I'm just trying to capture the flow of the picture at the moment, sort of like what direction things would be moving in. Don't like this one. Maybe we'll do a front one. So this is like the front of the foot, kind of like it's stopping in the water. And I'm making sort of like the shoulder, the collarbone shapes here. And sometimes I find it helpful to draw a center line. So this is like the center of the rib cage and how it would sort of flow to the back end of the dragon. I'm gonna move this leg down. Making some more room for my sketch. I think for this one it might be better in a portrait, so I'm just going to turn this around. Back. Excuse my vibrating phones. this might be a better leg shape, maybe. Don't like how the bottom part of this dragon is going, so I think I'm going to erase it and draw this part again. It's just not sitting right. We'll get the flow of the tail right first. This is the ankle, in case you can't tell. I think this needs to be wider. There. I think we're getting somewhere. Not sure if it's anyway good, but this is just how my sketches go, really. Here. This is my rough sketch. If I actually want anything to look anything decent and I'm just doing a sketch, I'll always do a double sketch, because my original sketches are such a messy nightmare that a normal person wouldn't be able to tell what I've actually drawn. So that's why I always create this messy sketch, and then I turn the opacity down, and then I have a new layer in which I sort of define things in less lines. I guess is the best way to describe it. Turn this down a little more. I'm doing a very stylistic curve to the wings here. Really, wings wouldn't bend like this, but I kind of like this sort of look, so sort of like encircling the dragon, so that's what I'm doing. Things don't always have to be super realistic. In fact, sometimes when you do things really realistic, they look odd because it's just, sometimes it's just perspective and stuff. It can be difficult. So it's okay sometimes to draw things less realistic if you're going for a stylized look. Alright. This foot's still weird. I think that's slightly better. Alright, let's get some head in here. Needs to have a head, apparently. What was I doing with these horns? Yeah. So yeah, this is normally about as detailed as I'll get before going into colouring. I don't like to spend too much time on the sketch since I do a lot of my defining of shapes with, you know, putting down solid colours. So a lot of these sketch lines are just going to disappear altogether. And I don't want to waste too much time on them. So yeah, it's probably all I'd really do before I just got down to adding colours and stuff to it. So that's pretty much my sketching process. You know, the whole thing, if I wasn't just going to go straight off the bat. As mentioned before, I do like to design something first if I don't already know what it's going to look like, and then putting it into some kind of pose after I know what it's actually going to be looking like, so that I have a better idea of how to place the shapes of the dragon and that kind of stuff. I'll put a bunch of bubbles around because underwater. Here's a fish. Love the fish. Best fish. There's your fish tutorial. You're welcome. Alright, well I think that'll do for this video. Let me know if you found it useful. I have been enjoying doing these longer videos. Hopefully you enjoy them as well. If you do want to see more, or if you have something specific you'd like me to draw or teach you, show you how I do it, then just mention it down in the comment section below. I do always read my comments as long as I get the notification for them, and I do enjoy reading all of your comments, so thank you everybody who does comment. And if you enjoy this video, don't forget to give me a like. You can subscribe if you want to see more. I also have a Patreon if you'd like to support me. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye.